Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. The U.S. has openly targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, further escalating tensions in the region. According to a report by CNN, UN Secretary General Guterres was deeply shocked by the earlier U.S. attack on Iran, considering it a dangerous escalation and a direct threat to international peace and security. The U.S. action has also caused China-U.S. relations to tense up again. A spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs strongly condemned the U.S. attack on Iran, targeting nuclear facilities under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. The spokesperson criticized the U.S. for seriously violating the principles and purposes of the UN Charter and international law, further intensifying tensions in the Middle East. China called on all parties involved in the conflict, especially Israel, to cease fire soon. To ensure the safety of civilians and to start dialogue and negotiations, China is willing to work together with the international community to pool efforts and uphold justice, making every effort to restore peace and stability in the Middle East. In addition, even as Trump wields massive tariffs against Southeast Asia and threatens Southeast Asian countries to side with the U.S. against China, ASEAN countries are still actively engaging with China. For example, from June 16 to 20, the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency vessel 8305 visited the port of Sanya in Hainan. Rear Admiral Aziz from the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency led a delegation to China to attend a working meeting at the same time. On the 18th, Deputy Director Zhao Shuazhang of the China Coast Guard and Rear Admiral Aziz, head of the Malaysian delegation, jointly chaired the first working talks between the Chinese and Malaysian Coast Guards. Both sides exchanged views on promoting personnel exchanges, information sharing, joint maritime search and rescue, and law enforcement cooperation. Both sides agreed that it is necessary to further deepen practical maritime cooperation, strengthen information exchange and interaction, properly handle maritime emergencies, and jointly safeguard regional maritime security and stability. This port visit marks the first time a vessel from the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency has visited China, and it is also the first official exchange and interaction between the maritime law enforcement agencies of China and Malaysia. This is a practical measure to implement the requirements for strengthening maritime cooperation as outlined in the joint statement released by China and Malaysia in April 2024, regarding the building of a high-level strategic China-Malaysia community with a shared future. The aim is to enhance mutual understanding, build greater trust, and deepen cooperation. Malaysia and China both have sovereignty disputes in the South China Sea, but the two countries have chosen to resolve them through consultation. The harmony between China and Malaysia actually puts pressure on the Philippines. By negotiating with China, not only can military trust be strengthened, but Malaysia can also achieve significant progress in economic and trade cooperation with China. As for the Philippines, by following the U.S. and confronting China, it has once again become the front line of conflict. Another country navigating between China and the U.S. is Singapore. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong will make an official visit to China from June 22 to June 25. This is his first visit to China since taking office as Prime Minister. According to a report by Lian Hezaobao on the 21st, Lawrence Wong recently said in an exclusive interview with China's Central Radio and Television's high-level talk show that he believes China will continue to develop well in the future, and he is grateful for that. There is a bright outlook for cooperation between Singapore and China. The report mentioned that in December 2023, Lawrence Wong made his last visit to China as Deputy Prime Minister, during which he emphasized that one should never try to hold China down or hope for China's decline. In a recent interview, when asked about this topic again, he reaffirmed his confidence in China's development prospects. He also laid out his vision for the future development of Singapore-China relations. On June 20, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Gui Jiaquan responded to a question, saying that after Prime Minister Lawrence Wong took office in May, he chose China as his first country to visit outside of ASEAN, which fully demonstrates the great importance he places on developing Singapore-China relations. During his visit, Lawrence Wong mentioned that ever since he entered politics, he has made it a point to visit China almost every year, and each time he has had good exchanges and meetings with his Chinese counterparts. This time, visiting China in his new role, Lawrence Wong believes it is especially meaningful to establish even closer ties with Chinese leaders, and he reaffirmed the commitment of both countries to further enhance bilateral cooperation. When talking about his confidence in China's development, Lawrence Wong said that China has an extraordinary track record of success, and the Chinese people possess strong creativity and adaptability. During his interactions with officials at various levels, he was deeply impressed by the high level of competence shown by Chinese leaders and their in-depth understanding of the issues at hand. He said this is not just about competence and grasp of the issues, but also about a willingness to listen and an open attitude towards finding better solutions. After all, it's impossible for any government to always get everything right. Mistakes are bound to happen from time to time. The hallmark of a high-quality system lies in its ability to reflect, learn, keep improving, and continuously enhance itself. In the context of China's system, Huang Suansai's observation on this point is worth noting, especially when it comes to understanding the Chinese leadership. As a Singaporean leader who moves between Eastern and Western cultures, if we put it more bluntly, one unique aspect of our country's system is that it keeps correcting itself and moving forward. For Singapore, a strong China actually means Singapore will be relatively safer. As China's economy grows, Singapore will actually have more business opportunities. You could say there is competition between China and the U.S., but it's best if they compete without breaking ties. If China and the U.S. turn hostile or if there is a direct conflict in the South China Sea, Southeast Asia definitely won't be able to escape unscathed either. Earlier, the former U.S. diplomat's blog channel, Pacific Two Poles, discussed the relationship between China, the U.S., and Asia. Dr. Evan Feigenbaum, a U.S. policy expert from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, analyzed during a conversation with blog hosts Li Zexi and Richard Gray, saying that it's all because of U.S. policy in Asia. Ignoring the needs of countries within the region and focusing too much on security concerns related to China, America's influence will gradually fade from the region within 10 years. Evan Feigenbaum is the Vice President for Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Previously, he held several senior positions at the U.S. State Department. His roles included Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for South Asian Affairs, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Central Asian Affairs, and he also focused on East Asian and Pacific regional affairs. After leaving government, he has been deeply involved in the private sector. Evan Feigenbaum pointed out that the U.S. used to be a security provider and an important economic leader in the Asia-Pacific region, serving as a driving force behind the prosperity of Asia's export-oriented economies. The U.S. was also a standard setter, rulemaker, and promoter of norms. However, he emphasized that if the U.S. still wants to maintain its influence in Asia today, it must respond to the core goals and demands of Asian countries themselves. He pointed out that, in reality, most countries in the region are unwilling to break away from China. Secondly, they actually don't have the conditions to do so. Because, for these countries, their top priority is achieving economic growth, securing employment, ensuring sustainability, and upgrading skills. In these areas, China can also offer cooperation options to countries within the region. Few countries in Asia would outright reject the U.S.'s efforts to promote the narrative of excluding China from Asia, or refuse to use Chinese capital and technology. However, such a stance is hard to gain recognition in 90% of the Asian region. Baum pointed out that it's already a cliché to say the U.S. needs to offer more competitive options, but the key issue isn't just about competition. The U.S. also needs to work together with its Asian partners to set up rules and frameworks. He mentioned his former boss at the U.S. State Department, the former U.S. Deputy Secretary of State. Charles Armitage recently passed away. He was a veteran expert on Japan and Asian affairs. Quoting one of Armitage's famous sayings, "To formulate the right China policy, you must first have the right Asia policy." What he meant was that the U.S. can't always directly influence China's decisions. But if you can shape the strategic environment in which China interacts with its partners, at the very least you can provide positive incentives or negative constraints for Beijing's decision-making path. However, Evan Feigenbaum has observed that nowadays, the U.S. has completely overturned the direction pointed out by Armitage. In recent administrations, instead of working hard to develop the right Asia policy to ensure the right China policy, the U.S. government has not done so at all. On the contrary, all Asia-related measures and strategies have become subordinate to the competition with China. The unfortunate thing is, this kind of China-focused approach actually runs counter to the views of most countries in the region. Evan Feigenbaum then goes on to analyze that the U.S. attitude towards China is now completely securitized, whether it's technology, people-to-people exchanges, economic interactions, or even Chinese investment, everything is seen as a national security issue. He thinks that this is just the American perspective. Malaysians might not agree, and even Vietnam, which has a complicated attitude towards China, might not see things the same way as the U.S. does now. This kind of thinking is hard to gain broad support, and it further weakens the appeal of the American-style solutions that the U.S. offers to the region. Can the U.S. adjust its attitude? Evan Feigenbaum says he's very doubtful about that. He believes that right now, both parties in the U.S. have already locked into a fixed policy path that's highly focused on security competition with China. Regional strategies are also being forced to fit this China-focused approach. This is exactly the main reason why the U.S.-led Quad security dialogue struggles to gain support outside its circle in Asia. The narrative pushed by the Quad is seriously out of touch with the positions of most countries in the region. Although there are individual exceptions like the Philippines, the government there changes every 6 years, and policies often shift completely after that. The policies we see in the Philippines today might look totally different 5 years from now. That's exactly where the challenge lies. He added that, frankly, regardless of the specific policies of the U.S. government, the Trump administration had neither principles nor strategy for Asia. It only served the narrow security-focused and self-serving goals of the U.S. It's really hard to build a truly effective multilateral alliance that can shape the regional order. When Trump pushes the America First agenda, countries in Asia naturally wonder, does America First mean we're left behind? Evan Feigenbaum and Bohn stressed that Asia is full of medium-sized powers with significant capabilities and their own interests at stake. They're eager to take part in shaping the region's future, but America's political direction just can't keep up. What's the reality? That's also why, for the past 15 years, people have been tirelessly writing articles predicting that the U.S. will gradually fade out of the region. In another podcast, Evan Feigenbaum once said that the U.S. is becoming Asia's mercenary with questionable motives, even though American fighter jets and warships can still patrol the region. But in other areas, there's very little to show for it. He said he's genuinely worried. You can imagine, 10 years from now, just shouting about the China threat will be as scary as a play in a theater. Hardly anyone will relate. Even though many countries in the region still see the U.S. as a counterbalance to China, in many other respects, Asia is actually stepping into a post-American era of de-Americanization. That's what we call a crisis of trust. People have no way to be sure that, apart from the security field, the U.S. will be present in a way that aligns with their goals. Also, Evan Feigenbaum said, if U.S. tariff policies seriously hurt the growth of other countries, how can you still casually and quietly say, I'm your top security partner, just forget about all the unpleasant stuff? He believes that, in the eyes of Asian countries, everything ultimately comes down to practical interests. So, I want to reiterate, within 10 years, the role of the U.S. in Asia will completely deviate from its historical image. To put it simply, a former U.S. diplomat's analysis is quite rational. Under the current geopolitical and economic realities, it's very difficult for the U.S. to maintain its influence. The U.S. now only has the ability to cause destruction, but no longer has the capability to help other countries develop their economies. On top of that, all it knows is how to pressure others and confront China. Leaders of Asian countries are much more pragmatic and shrewd than Western politicians, so why would they get on the US's anti-China bandwagon? Hi everyone, besides videos on this channel, Bus Uncle also has videos available on another platform, SEK Lao Toy. SEK Lao Toy has a lot of exclusive content, and we welcome viewers from all over the world to subscribe. Just search for Bus Uncle on the internet and go to the Bus Uncle website, and you'll be able to find SEK Lao Toy. Producing content for SEK Lao Toy requires a lot of resources, so we hope you'll support Bus Uncle by subscribing to SEK Lao Toy. With your support, we can keep making more programs. Thank you, everyone.